Have you ever given everything to someone who gave you almost nothing back? Have you ever stayed in a relationship long after it stopped serving you, hoping they'd finally see your worth? Have you ever felt like your love was too intense, too needy, too much? Here's what nobody tells you. Loving too much isn't about being weak or desperate. According to research on attachment theory and childhood development, people who love intensely often learned early in life that love had to be earned through sacrifice, that their needs came second, and that being needed was the only way to be valued. This isn't a character flaw, it's a survival pattern that your brain developed to cope with emotional unavailability. And psychology can explain exactly why you do it. Let's break down the real psychology behind people who love too much. And if you're already recognizing yourself in this, know that you're not alone. There's an entire community here who understands. Subscribe to stay connected as we break down exactly why this happens, because understanding is the first step to healing. 1. They learned early that love requires self-abandonment. Most people who love too much grew up in environments where their emotional needs weren't consistently met. Maybe you had a parent who was physically present but emotionally absent. Maybe you were parentified, forced to manage adult emotions before you could process your own. Research on childhood emotional neglect shows that when children don't receive attuned care, they internalize a painful lesson. My needs are too much. I must earn love by meeting others' needs first. Dr. Jonice Webb's work on childhood emotional neglect reveals that kids in these environments become hyper-attuned to others' emotions while learning to suppress their own. You became an expert at reading the room, managing everyone's feelings, keeping the peace, but you never learned that your needs mattered too. This created what psychologists call a self-abandonment pattern. You learned that love meant sacrifice, that being good meant being invisible, that connection required you to disappear. You're not loving too much. You're recreating the only version of love you were taught. But here's where it gets complicated. 2. Their entire sense of value is tied to usefulness. When love was conditional in childhood, you learned a devastating equation. I am valuable only when I am needed. This isn't conscious. It's a deeply embedded belief that drives every relationship pattern. Research on codependency shows that people who love too much often derive their self-esteem not from who they are, but from what they provide. You feel most secure when you're fixing someone, helping someone, saving someone. When a relationship is stable and mutual, you might even feel unnecessary and start sabotaging it. This is called savior complex, and it's exhausting. You're not actually connecting, you're performing worthiness. Psychologist Melody Beattie, who pioneered codependency research, describes this as other esteem instead of self-esteem. Your mood depends on their mood. Your worth depends on their approval. Your peace depends on their stability. You've outsourced your value to someone else's validation. This is why you keep choosing emotionally unavailable people. They confirm what you already believe, that love must be earned, that you're not enough as you are, that your value lies in your sacrifice. And let's be honest about something else. 3. They fall in love with who someone could be, not who they are. This might be the most painful pattern. You have an incredible capacity for empathy and vision. You see people's wounds, their potential, their buried goodness, and because you're so skilled at understanding pain, you believe you can love them into healing. But here's what research on relationships shows. You cannot love someone into change. Dr. Sue Johnson's work on attachment reveals that people who love too much often have what's called hyperactivated attachment systems. Your empathy is so strong that you feel their pain as your own. You see their childhood trauma. You understand why they can't commit, why they pull away, why they hurt you. And your brain tells you if you just love them enough, they'll finally feel safe enough to love you back. But potential isn't reality, and understanding someone's pain doesn't make them capable of meeting your needs. You're not in a relationship with a real person. You're in a relationship with a fantasy, with the version of them you've constructed in your mind. And every time they show you who they really are, you explain it away. But wait, there's more. 4. Staying feels safer than leaving, even when staying hurts. Research on anxious attachment shows that people who love too much often experienced inconsistent caregiving in childhood. Love was unpredictable. Sometimes you were seen, sometimes ignored. This created what psychologists call protest behavior. You learned to cling harder when someone pulled away, to give more when you felt them leaving, to shrink yourself to avoid abandonment. As an adult, this manifests as staying in relationships that have expired. You tolerate disrespect, accept breadcrumbs, rationalize bad behavior, because the fear of being alone feels more terrifying than the pain of being unseen. Dr. Amir Levine's research on attachment styles reveals that anxiously attached people would rather be in an unhappy relationship than no relationship at all. Your nervous system equates aloneness with danger. Abandonment feels like annihilation. So you stay, you give more, you try harder, you twist yourself into whatever shape they need, hoping that if you just love them correctly, they won't leave. But you're not preserving love, you're prolonging your own suffering. Here's what nobody understands. 5. They over-explain bad behavior until nothing is a deal breaker. This is where your intelligence works against you. Because you're empathetic and psychologically minded, you can explain anything. They're emotionally unavailable. They have childhood wounds. They're inconsistent. They're scared of intimacy. They disrespect your boundaries. They don't know how to communicate. Research on cognitive dissonance shows that when our actions don't match our values, our brain creates narratives to resolve the tension. You value yourself, but you're accepting mistreatment. So your brain generates explanations that preserve both. This isn't mistreatment. They're just struggling. I'm being patient and understanding. Psychologist Harriet Lerner calls this de-selfing. You've become so skilled at understanding their perspective that you've lost access to your own. You can't tell the difference between compassion and self-betrayal anymore. Every red flag becomes a growth opportunity. Every boundary violation becomes something to work through. But here's the thing. Understanding why someone hurts you doesn't make it hurt less. And explaining their behavior doesn't make it acceptable. You're not being mature. You're being complicit in your own neglect. And here's the final piece. 6. They've confused suffering with depth. Somewhere along the way, you learn that real love requires struggle, that if it's easy, it's not meaningful, that sacrifice equals devotion. This belief keeps you trapped in relationships that drain you. Research on trauma bonding shows that intense relationships marked by intermittent reinforcement, where affection is unpredictable and rare, create the strongest attachments. The highs feel higher because the lows are so devastating. You mistake intensity for intimacy. You confuse anxiety for passion. You believe that if you're not fighting for it, it's not real. But healthy love isn't hard work. It's partnership. It's not supposed to hurt this much. Dr. Alexandra Solomon's work on relational self-awareness shows that people who grew up with inconsistent love often need drama to feel connected. Stability feels boring because your nervous system associates love with chaos. But that's not love, that's trauma repetition. You're not too much. You've just been taught that love means losing yourself, and you've become so good at it, you don't even notice you're gone. So what does all this mean? If you love too much, you're not broken, you're not needy, you're not dramatic. You developed these patterns as a brilliant adaptation to early emotional neglect or inconsistent care. Your capacity to love deeply is actually a strength. The problem isn't the depth of your love, it's where you're directing it and how you've learned to abandon yourself in the process. The next time you find yourself giving everything to someone who gives nothing back, ask yourself, am I loving them or am I trying to earn my own worthiness? Am I seeing them clearly or am I seeing their potential? You don't need to love less. You need to love yourself first. And that's not selfish. That's survival. If this resonated with you, leave a comment, share your experience. You're not alone in this pattern, and awareness is the first step toward breaking it. Your love is not too much. It's just been directed at the wrong person. Everyone but yourself.